What's up, friends? My name's Georgie. A big old welcome to the Just Breathe podcast, where I'll be talking all things breathing to help empower you guys to use the power of your breath to harness your bodies and minds. In today's powerful conversation, I'll be chatting with someone who was a huge part of my personal journey with breathwork. Caws is a certified Oxygen Advantage Master Instructor. He's also a level 4 specialist personal trainer, functional movement coach, and Buteyko Practitioner. Gray is currently training to be a teacher of Qi Gong as well. He trains clients on a one-to-one basis and also holds regular workshops and retreats in London, across the UK, and throughout Europe, incorporating running, walking, and the Oxygen Advantage Method. Gray also runs live online programs and courses and worked really closely with Patrick McKeown as he was developing the Oxygen Advantage program. Gray and I had such an inspirational and powerful conversation, and he was generous enough to share his story with me of how he got into the world of wellness. We also got onto the topics of how breathwork can revolutionize your running, as well as how by optimizing your breathing whilst at rest, you can unlock your own fitness potential. Gray has such a brilliant curiosity about the human body and mind, and he's always finding new interesting ways and asking new questions about how we can optimize our health and well-being in the most efficient way. And he truly was the most incredible teacher. I could not have asked for a better mentor to guide me through my personal journey with the Oxygen Advantage program. A little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Just Breathe podcast. Let's keep on building our strong breathing community. The more people talking about breathing, the more people optimizing their health, the better. All right, let's jump right into today's powerful conversation. I really hope you enjoy it. This is episode 32 of Just Breathe with the legend that is Caws. What's up, Gray? How's it going?
Hello, good to see you. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you.
No, thanks for coming on the Just Breathe podcast. It has taken way too long for me to get you on my podcast. Of course,
yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah, you were the main man on my breathing journey. So Gray was my Oxygen Advantage instructor and led me on my Oxygen Advantage journey. And so, yeah, you were a huge part of my journey. So of course, it's so important for you to share your story on what is now the Just Breathe podcast.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in. So how did you get into this whole sort of wellness debacle anyway? Where did it all start with you? Were you always into wellness sort of your whole life, or?
Well, at school, I was terrible at sports. I was typically the last one to be picked for the team.
Oh, no.
Didn't enjoy sport or fitness at all at school.
Right.
But what I did enjoy, and so it's pouring with rain here, so just if you can hear rain dripping on the roof.
It's a bit of nature background noise. It's a little bit of
it's not distracting. Yeah,
no.
it's my soundscape.
It's a soundscape for the background. Oh.
So what I did enjoy at school actually as a kid was cross-country running. And I mean, I suppose I'm lucky in my era that we were playing outside all day long. So we were naturally outside, having fun, playing, pogo sticks, stilts, go-karts, dens and stuff like that. So what I really enjoyed was being in the outdoors and exploring. And then I suppose in my 20s, off to college, stuff like that. And I was never not unhealthy. I suppose I did smoke and I did drink,
Right.
but I wasn't really involved in fitness. I used to enjoy swimming. So go for occasional swim, but that would be it. And then in my early 40s, I was like, right, got to get fit, got to make sure that I get to 50 and be fit and healthy. And actually, I'd never been to a gym until I think I was about 42. And I remember the first time, it was the first time I went into a gym. And I'd been out for lunch with a couple of friends for a birthday lunch.
Okay.
And we'd had champagne. We'd been drinking champagne. And I never thought I'm going to the gym. And I remember going to the gym and this poor guy was giving me an induction. And I was like, I feel a little bit drunk.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether he noticed or not. I'd only had like a glass of champagne, but I can still see that going, what am I doing here in this gym? So that's when I started to get sort of like into fitness and into gym work. And I actually loved working in the gym, and I really got into it and seeing how different things, how you could change your body and how you could change, how you could feel better just by doing some general exercise. And suddenly in the gym was this thing that was a treadmill, and I was like, oh, I want to have a go on that again, because I haven't run since I was at school and doing cross-country running.
Cross-country, right.
So I got the trainer, said to him, right, I want to show me how to work the treadmill. And that's sort of like the start of my running journey from where I am now. So what I did when I was on the treadmill is I was like thinking, how do you run effectively, and how do you run without killing yourself, basically? Because what I tended to find was that, no disrespect to the trainer, but he was using the running as like, right, this is a warm-up, let's get warm, let's run a mile as fast as we can.
Oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah, and which is great, which is good, because you want to do that, you want to get the body energized and everything. But for me, that wasn't working at that moment until I found how to run from a technique point of view, to make sure that I'm doing it right, basically, because I'm quite logical and I want to know what's going on and what are the best ways of doing things. And I'd read about running injuries, and anywhere between 30 and 80% of runners are injured in any one time.
That doesn't surprise me
during
at all.
The year. So that's how I got into running technique, and I was on the internet looking for ways of running, and there was a lot of conflicting ideas on like heel strike, land on your foot, lean back, stand up, lean over, and obviously tried all of these things, and some bits worked, some bits didn't work. And then I read a book called Qi Running by an ultra runner called Danny Dreyer from the States.
Okay.
And what I liked about this book was that it was all quite simple, and it was quite logical on some of the exercises. It wasn't overcomplicated, and some just very simple things to focus on in terms of improving your running technique. I'd no background in Tai Chi or energy work or anything like that, but I got involved in Qi running. And this is a long way in getting involved with breath work, but obviously through Danny Dreyer. So I trained then as a Qi running coach. Well, actually, sorry, tell me when to stop and tell me when you want to ask me something else.
No, I'm enjoying it. I mean, I've definitely, it's really interesting how you said you read that there were so many conflicting ideas about running, and then you were drawn to Qi Gong, because Qi Gong and Tai Chi, that realm is very visual. And whereas I'm sure the things you're reading in magazines, like you said, was sort of heels, lean back, very specific sort of mechanical things to do with your body, rather than a visual or an energy or an idea that is so much easier to attach to. And I love the fact that your curiosity is actually what led you to all of this. I heard earlier today, actually, that it's now being scientifically proven that curiosity can actually lengthen your life. It keeps you young. It keeps you learning. It makes you more intelligent, because if you can continuously ask questions, you're the infinite scientist, because the problem is never solved because you're just continuously curious. And so I love that. I love how that's what's brought you really into the world of wellness and into the world of breath work to help so many other people, because I'm a personal trainer myself, as well as teaching the Oxygen Advantage. Of course, I combine the two, but I can't tell you how many clients come to me and say either I can't run or, oh, running's really hard. And I'll say, well, how are you running? And always you get a confused face, like, what do you mean, how am I running? I'm just running. And it's interesting. It's interesting. So how you run, and so what is the Qi running way to run, I suppose, is my question.
Very good question, actually. It's based on the principles of Tai Chi, and I'm not teaching Qi running anymore. I worked for about 10 years teaching Qi running. But what I learned from it, and what I learned from working with the clients, is that it's a combination of those two things you talked about. Because obviously there's a biomechanical element to running, or to moving. So we want to understand the biomechanics of running. But for me, the biggest part of running is, like you say, is like, how do you run and why do you run? And what do you perceive that running is all about? So running, if you just think of running as to be as fast as possible, then you're just going to push your body as fast as possible, which is good if you understand then what is happening to the body and what is happening to the breath. And this is where the breath comes into it, because there's a couple of quotes that I use when I'm teaching breath work. And one is that if breathing is not normalized, no other movement pattern can be. So I think that's the starting point. So if you think from the point of view of running, if you are pushing it with the breath and you're out of breath all of the time, then you're not going to be moving as efficiently as you can be. And you might actually be overreaching yourself. Because if there's the first sign of any neuromuscular overload, so if your muscles are overloaded, or if your brain is overloaded, your nervous system is overloaded, the first sign where you notice that, guess where that is? It's in the breath. So you stress the breath. You're struggling. So when I'm working with runners or with anybody from a training point of view, from an exercise point of view, is be guided by the breath. Because if you're out of breath, or if you're struggling with the breath, then you're not going to be in that optimal place in terms of movement. And if you watch the majority of people running on outside, they're well, I would say almost like the majority, they're out of breath, they're puffing and they're panting. Now that might be their perception of what running is all about.
Should be.
Because we're told, right, to exercise, I'm doing my cardio, so I need to breathe hard, and I need to really get my heart rate up and push it and push it and push it, which is great. But always be in control of the breath. Never struggle with the breath. And actually, you only want to be doing that element of your training for a short period of time, because guess what? If you do that too much, if you push yourself too much, where your structure maybe can't take that from a biomechanical point of view, something is going to give, something is going to break. So the knee might go, or the hip might go, or pain in the back, or shin splints, all of these little niggles and injuries that come in. But if you are guided by the breath, that can really make sure that you don't overload the body.
Yeah, and that perception of struggle actually, I think, really screws a lot of people over, because it creates a vicious cycle that is completely unsustainable, doesn't it? People get that inspiration and, yes, that intention of, I'm going to take up running, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to get healthy, which I suppose is where your journey to wellness also started. But then without having that curiosity to go, why am I running? And how do I need to run? Because what I love about the idea of Tai Chi and the principles of Tai Chi applied to running is that it's an inside out approach. It comes from an awareness point of view. You listen to your body and then you take action. Whereas many runners will even Google, what's sort of a normal 5K time, right? That's my goal. And that's completely, sort of, it's not unachievable, but it's a really interesting way of looking at it, from waiting for someone else to tell you what your body needs. Because the body is communicating to us all the time, and it's so intelligent. And I think we really forget that. And thank goodness for the practices of Tai Chi and these ancient traditional practices that remind us of how intelligent our bodies are, and that no two human beings really are the same. Everyone has their own individual quirks and needs and different little idiosyncrasies that they need to attend to. And so if you don't listen, how can you be efficient? How can you truly serve yourself? It's I suppose it's kind of like you wouldn't drive a Mercedes the same way you drive a truck. So with running, don't mistake the Mercedes for the truck. And
for the truck. I like that analogy. I'll use that at my next workshop.
It just came to me.
Or are you a truck?
I am. That'll go down really well. Really well with clients.
Yes.
You're a bit of a truck at the moment, but I think we're looking to get to the Mercedes kind of vibe. But yeah, I love that it's an inside out approach. And I've been working a lot with women on a more intuitive way of approaching fitness, of listening to your body, because especially of my generation, women in their 20s and 30s, it's become so obsessive with the world of social media. Everyone is looking for what they should be doing, what they should look like, how they, even now breathwork's on the way up, asking famous people like Patrick McKeown, how should I breathe? And he's going to tell you, well, only you can know exactly how you should breathe. I can guide you through an exercise, but no one can tell you exactly how you should do anything. Only you can know that, right? Do you find that with a lot of people you work with?
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, with the breath work, it's such a challenging one, because how long will it take me to learn? How long will it take me to learn the oxygen advantage?
Right.
And yeah, there is certain... it's good to have those goals and sort of like measurements, if you like. So it's always important to have that, so we can monitor, so that we're not just going, oh, this is really fluffy and just run as you feel. It's not about that. It's about, as you say, tuning into your body, and allowing. When you think of running, the speed will happen when you are more efficient with your breathing and when you're more efficient with the movement. Yeah, I like what you say there. Interestingly, I've been doing a workshop. I've been attending a workshop or a Zoom workshop, not teaching it, with a fantastic breath worker who's an Oxygen Advantage coach, and she got a group of guys together. And what I really liked about this, we did 5 weeks, but there was no purpose, if you like, to the sessions, because always when you think, oh, what am I going to get out of this session, or what's my intention in this practice, which is great, which is important, but it's nice just to go and do something without having any expectations. And guess what? Things might happen that you didn't expect to happen. If you expect it to happen, then your mind's waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, or if you expect something to happen, you might actually bypass something that happened that was really crucial, because you're so focused on waiting for that to happen, you actually miss the key point.
That you wouldn't have noticed.
You wouldn't have noticed. Yeah, exactly. So I'm very much about the entering a circumstance with no expectation. And if you asked me 2 years ago, I'd have said that was absolute bull. Like, to say, what do you mean enter with no expectation? Like, I'm just going to go and say, I expect nothing. Like, come on, there's always got to be something you get out of it. And it's maybe that Zen idea of the beginner's mind, that you get something out of anything. You can find a lesson and a knowledge in any sort of everything, and including nothingness and stillness. An
interesting thing in terms of, if you think about that, I'm just thinking an example I had when I was doing a race, in inverted commas. And I use a Garmin, so I do obviously monitor how far I run and what's running and everything like that. And the Garmin didn't work. And that's like, you're in 2 ways. You can either panic and go, oh my God, I don't know what my pace is, and I have to follow this pace, and what if I'm going too fast? Or I can just relax into it and just, like you say, just go with the flow. So there were 10-kilometer markers. So I knew roughly where I was, but I didn't know what time it was. And the bizarre thing was, I ran that faster than I would have done if I'd have been going, right, this is the pace I should be running at, because I was listening to my body rather than being guided by the tech. Now, the tech is great to give you that biofeedback, feedback being the key. But that taught me a lesson of don't rely on that. And that's the point you make there, because I would have stuck to a pace that I thought I should be running at, and I wouldn't have achieved that faster pace because I would have pulled back into that slower pace. So that's another way of looking at it, from that like expectations.
Yeah, you're right. I have a Garmin as well, and I use it a lot for my road cycling. And some people would say, isn't that sort of, doesn't that clash with your intuitive approach? And say, well, there's no rigidness to it. It's a shapeless approach where I agree that it depends how you are approaching those measurements. It's again, like what we were just saying, that it's not outside in. I'm not waiting for the Garmin to tell me how fast I should be running. Yeah. I'll do the run or do the cycle, and then I'll go, oh, that's interesting. I went here, I was this fast, I was that fast, because a unit of measurement, it feeds that curiosity to, oh, I'm actually getting stronger this way, I'm getting faster this way, this isn't serving me, this is. But the feedback is really important, because it's not the Garmin that comes first, it's the experience and then the feedback. Yeah, I think that's really important.
And that's the Garmin and the heart rate stuff is great for the breath work, because when we look at like running aerobically, and running, just breathing in and out through the nose, then if you're looking at heart rate stuff, you can monitor and see whether you're running in that heart rate training zone. So if you're geeky and you like all of that tech and you like your measurements and you like your spreadsheet, it works for me. It works even better. So today I was doing a low heart rate run. Or low heart rate movement. So there were points when I was walking to keep my heart rate down into a very low sort of like gear 1 breath. So the breath is really easy. I'm hardly changing my breath rate. And if I do that once a week, then it will vary. So sometimes I can do that and keep my heart rate low, and all of it is running. Right. Sometimes a bit is walking. So that really, again, just highlights how the body changes and how the breath changes. So if you are just literally going on pace, you might be using the wrong effort level. So then that's what, again, can feed into overtraining. That's really interesting, because it is really, really crucial to go with the rhythm of your body, which fluctuates day to day, especially women throughout the cycle. They'll probably really notice a certain fluctuation. Of course, men go on a certain cycle as well. But with women, it's just so prominent with the changing hormones. That's really interesting. So for all the runners listening that do like to geek out on all this stuff, myself included, that I'm still almost learning this way as a personal trainer, because you're always learning. With the heart rate, I know you use that as a perceived rate of exertion, don't you? You have a great sort of correlation with that. And so I'd love to hear a bit about that. And also, you said you do that low heart rate run once a week. What is the rest of your week like? Because I think that's fab that you've got a low heart rate run, because many people would go, oh, I walked, I failed, I stopped running, so I failed. That's interesting that you purposefully will walk, because you're like, it's not the idea is to keep my heart rate low. So so definitely the low heart rate one, there's a lot of stuff. Philmafetone will give you a really simple way of calculating your low heart rate, where you take 180 minus your age, and then you add 5 or 10 depending on fitness levels. Right. Or Brian McKenzie will give you some really good heart rate tables and everything. And I use what I call breath gears. Yes. So I will have gear 1, which would be sort of like your low mafetone 180 minus your age, which is that hardly any increase in breath rate. So it's a really good way of starting off, going from a walk to a really, really easy gear 1 run. And then you maintain that until you notice the breath changing.
Right.
And if you're running downhill, nice. If you're a steady downhill,
yeah,
you can maintain that most probably for quite a long period of time.
Yeah.
Even if you've got a slight incline, then it's going to be more challenging. So then you walk it.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose. You're talking about having no intention and no purpose. That's the intention of that low heart rate run. Yeah. And that is what is really going to help to build up your aerobic base. Right. And that is what I use as a recovery run. So yesterday I was doing a longer run. So today I went out for a recovery run. So that's what I do. I do that low heart rate run. It's great, as you say, you run a little bit, then you walk, you see things that you don't see when you're running. You can let the breath settle, tune in with the breath, everything like that, tune in with your body. How's it feeling in the body? How's your feet feeling? How are you feeling connected to the ground? How are you feeling connected to the sky? It's a really nice, easy run.
Real.
So I would say that is definitely one run. Again, all of this depends on what you are working towards or what you're training for, but that is one run that you always need to include in a program.
One per week.
At least one per week, I would say.
Yeah.
And then the other key run is your long, slow distance run. Now, again, that depends on what you're training for. So if you're training for a marathon, those long, slow distance runs can go anywhere up to like 22 miles from miles. If you're training for a 10K, your long, slow distance run might only be 4 miles or 3 miles. So it doesn't mean to say it has to be a long distance. If you're starting off running, it might be a kilometre.
Yeah, that might be a distance for you.
So
that's okay.
Well, yes, definitely. And then that would be in your gear 2. So that's when you can challenge yourself a little bit more. But again, from a breathing point of view or from a breathwork point of view, you're still easily breathing in and out through the nose. There might be a little bit more energy, a little bit more power behind it, but it's something that you feel you should be able to sustain for a long period of time.
Right.
So I use that intention of, when I'm going out to do that type of run, this is the feeling that I should have if I want to keep doing this all day long. So it's a little bit more challenging than that easy walk run, which you could do all week long.
Yeah.
But you should be able to think, I can maintain this for a long period of time. Now, as you say, if your long period of time is a mile or a kilometre, then you've achieved your goal with that run.
Yeah.
And the majority then of your training program is going to be in that aerobic training zone. So you can work in that aerobic training zone. And I would there's a really good way of just looking at it, that you're doing 80% of your training pretty easy.
Yeah.
And then 20% is the cherry on the top, is the more intensity type training. So when you
anaerobic.
So going up to gear 3, going more towards the anaerobic threshold, and that's when you would use things like maybe hill repeats or sprints, where you are putting that little bit more energy behind, a little bit more energy and more power behind the run. But this goes back to what we said at the very beginning, is that you only want to do that if your structure is sufficiently able to take that load. A really good client said to me, it's like going back to your car analogy, the client said it's like making sure your chassis is strong enough to take it.
Yeah.
If you have your truck on a Cinquecento, is that a car? What's the little cars?
A little sports car or something.
Like smart car, and you put a truck on top of the smart car and then try and hoik that smart car chassis up a hill, it's going to crack and it's going to collapse and it's going to break.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing with any fitness. So if you're doing deadlifts or if you're doing kettlebell swings, you've got to have that structure strong and in place to be able to take that load, that physical load.
Yeah.
And if the structure can't take that load, as you say, as we said before, the first place you're going to notice that is in the breath. The breath is the first signal to say, hang on a minute, you've had enough. You're pushing yourself too much.
Yeah. So, would you also say it's one of the easiest things to fix as well, in terms of if that foundation is weak, in terms of if you're breathing dysfunctionally, that would also be the first thing you look to address, because you'll also be going in a constant loop of sort of disappointment and dysfunction if your breathing is also dysfunctional. I'm sure we'll talk more about the Oxygen Advantage in a moment, but you know, you said before, if your breathing is dysfunctional, your movement will also be dysfunctional, and so would that be your first port of call, even before you even start moving, that to assess if you are breathing functionally or not?
Definitely. And I would say maybe not before you start moving, because obviously the breathing is different, or you can have what is what is fascinating is somebody emailed me the other day and said, I'm dysfunctionally breathing because I'm talking all day long. Right. And I was like, well, actually, you're not dysfunctionally breathing, because we have to talk all day long. So how do we make you breathe more efficiently when you're talking?
Yeah.
So dysfunctional, you could almost say there isn't such a thing as dysfunctional breathing. This is going to go down well. But if you think about it, we are going to breathe in different ways in whatever we do.
Yeah.
So when we say maybe mouth breathing is dysfunctional if we're sat watching TV with our mouth wide open, or sleeping with our mouth wide open. But if we're doing a power exercise, or if we are doing that 8-second sprint up a hill, and you need to breathe out through the mouth, then in that gear, in that particular situation, mouth breathing is more beneficial than trying to nasal breathe all of the time. But you're quite right, we need to step back to that very first easy stage where you address how you're breathing. And the easiest stage to address that is breath awareness in a resting posture. Because if we're breathing and balancing in a resting posture, that creates sort of like that foundation. That's the baseline.
Yeah.
So you will see if somebody's resting and their mouth is wide open, you know they're going to be dysfunctionally breathing when they go into movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, for someone, say, listening, who maybe is thinking of taking up running, but the idea terrifies them, perhaps it's reassuring to know that if you are doing that gear 1, walk, run, and that's the only thing you do for 6 weeks until you get your breathing to a solidly comfortable place while you're in that brisk walk, perhaps even a light jog, that is okay. That just because here, you know, Gray says as a running coach, oh, I will do a long, slow distance run and a fartlek training, perhaps interval training or hill sprints, and then a rest day, you know, maybe another one, so much running that someone says, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. It's that per individual, I suppose, isn't it? That everyone's journey is different, and that you could be doing gear 1 for 6 weeks, and that's okay.
As you say, it's perception of what running is all about.
Yeah.
And Couch to 5K is a brilliant app, and I would always recommend it to clients. But what I would say is that rather than time it and go, right, now I'm going to run for 5 minutes, walk for 2 minutes, is go with a breath. So do your Couch to 5K and then monitor at the end of it how far you got or how long you've got, so that the speed and the time and the distance, all of those things are consequences of efficient movement and efficient breathing.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that thing again, is you might realize you're quicker than you would have been if you'd have been trying to time it. Because the minute you're given a countdown to say, right, I've got to keep going for 5 seconds, you get to that point where you're going, oh, push it. That's like when you're doing reps with an exercise, the last 2 reps, however many you do, if you're counting reps, the last 2 reps are always going to be the hardest, because just from a psychological point of view, into the end.
Yeah, and you stop listening to your body at that point as well, don't you? When you hear those last few seconds, you're just like, let's just finish this, let's get it over and done with. Whereas if you don't know when the end is, it's more just, okay, I can only be with this moment. If there's no end and there's no beginning, I can only be with the now. And I'm actually in tune then, and I'm actually listening. But I think this is a good place to sort of, I guess, jump into the Oxygen Advantage, and I suppose rewind a little bit in terms of how the running led you onto the Oxygen Advantage. I think it's incredibly important for runners still nowadays. The amount of people I see running around that are huffing and puffing like steam trains, and I just feel like taking their hands and saying, guys, doesn't need to be this difficult. Doesn't need to be this struggle. Not necessary. Like, and you know, I learned from you transform my running without even directly teaching me running, just teach me the Oxygen Advantage. But just from your 2 points of telling me to run like I was running on twigs, and to run only to a sort of comfortable level of breathing, that suddenly I ran further than I ever did before, but it felt like a meditation. So
I can't remember telling you to run on twigs.
You did. You told me to run as if I was running on twiglets, like twigs, really light feet, and really sort of small paces. And I think I used to run quite heavy. I used to slam my feet down and do sort of the Giselle leaps. I have such long legs, and whereas making it really light and much smaller steps, it made my running efficient.
That's one of the points, like you say, from in terms of technique, where you think that if you do longer strides, it's all about striding out in front.
Yeah.
But actually, that makes it very heavy, and you're using more muscle power then. Whereas you want to think, like you said there, as skipping.
Yeah.
So if you watch someone skipping, there's a real energy to that skip, and they're standing on the spot. And that's because then you're using the elasticity throughout the body. And that's what was more efficient from a running point of view. So when you go with the breath from that walk to run, is you're literally just going to that nice, light, quick step. So you keep the steps light and quick, but you keep the pace slow. So going back to the Oxygen Advantage, I met Patrick through Danny Dreyer. So Danny Dreyer from Qi Running. Because by then I trained as a Qi running instructor. I trained as a personal trainer, because I didn't have any anatomy and physiology background. And Patrick was in Ireland and Danny was in the States, and they'd been talking with each other because I think that Danny had spoken to Patrick regarding the Oxygen Advantage. So there's some mention of Qi running in the Oxygen Advantage. So Danny put Patrick in touch with me because we were closer in the UK. And so I spoke to Patrick, got on really well. He came over and we did the first ever masterclass in London for the Oxygen Advantage. That was before there were any instructors or not many people had heard about it. We were dragging clients and going, please come and join this masterclass. So Patrick came over and did the masterclass. That went really well. And then he decided to create instructors. So he followed sort of like the Qi running format of teaching instructor training. So I did the first instructor training. I went on his instructor training in 2016, I think it was. A lot of the masters, a lot of guys still from there have gone on to do loads and loads of great stuff. So I started teaching straight away after that. So that's how I got involved with Patrick and with the Oxygen Advantage, and I've just seen it develop so much since then. So when we were doing in-person training, Patrick used to lead it, obviously, but I used to sort of like help him out in the London trainings when he was over here. So yeah, that's how I've been involved with it.
Yeah, and of course the Oxygen Advantage sort of is a little bit of a spin-off from the Pateko Method, which Patrick used to help cure his asthma, and it has cured thousands of cases of asthma across the world. And obviously Pateko is famous for reduced volume breathing and for lighter breathing, and the Oxygen Advantage gets the biomechanics and the cadence, the rhythm involved as well. And when you first got involved in it, was there a particular focus already on the sports performance, hence sort of the combo with running?
Yeah, so I think Patrick, when he devised the Oxygen Advantage, he had spoken to people about Buteyko, And I think this is how the story goes. He'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But, somebody had said to him, if you can translate this into sports performance, it will make a massive big difference. Now, Patrick will admit he's not a movement coach or a running coach.
No.
But obviously what he is an amazing breath worker and a great researcher. So he's pulled in all of these research papers looking at VO2 max, looking at aerobic capacity, looking at all of the studies where they were using breath holds, looking back at the old training programs. Some of the old runners who would use breath holds and actually run and pass out to actually improve their performance. So he got all of this background stuff together and then put the course together to say the Oxygen Advantage is about improving sports performance. But the key to improving sports performance, which is what I love about it, is working with breathing in everyday life.
Yeah.
Because again, when you come to exercise, everybody, how do I breathe when I run? How do I breathe when I lift weights? How do I breathe when I swing a kettlebell?
Yeah.
That breathing is never going to be functional enough or optimal. Maybe functional enough is the wrong thing to say. It's never going to be as good as it could be unless you sort out your breathing in everyday life. So if you're not sleeping well and you're over breathing or not breathing in your sleep, or if you're stressed out during the day, so the breathing is a little bit more chaotic. If you're putting stress on the body in everyday life and then stress the body with exercise, it's too much.
Stress on stress.
Again, why stress on stress. It's the same things. We use stress to get rid of stress, and then it just builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, and then something breaks.
Yeah.
So what I love about the Oxygen Advantage, which I don't believe any other sort of like method teaches in a way or highlights in a way, is actually to improve your sports performance, make sure that your breathing is great or the majority of the time. And again, how you breathe when you are in sport it should be natural.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be I'm having to breathe like this when I'm running, or I'm having to breathe like this when I'm lifting weights. Now, obviously, in certain, like if you're doing deadlifts and stuff like that, if you're doing 1 rep maxes, you need a particular brace, breath hold, or whatever to do that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be thinking when you are running or when you're swinging kettlebells, how do I breathe?
No. And, there's a brilliant teacher that I follow called Simon Borg-Olivier, and I had him on the podcast previously. That was a great episode as well. Amazing insights. But he said in one of his workshops, if you have to constantly think about your breathing whilst you're exercising, you're doing the wrong kind of exercise for you, because breathing should not be a struggle whilst you are exercising. That is a myth. It should not be a struggle. It should be, perhaps there might be some discomfort noticed, and also there may be a moment, like Grace said just then, if you're doing a 1 rep max, if you're doing an 8-second sprint, there might be a moment where the breathing is a struggle there, in that 20%, in that moment that's like, I'm really getting to my threshold. But for 80-90% of the time, it should be fairly effortless, even when you're working the body, right? Because then you're working efficiently.
But it's interesting what you say there about a struggle when you get to that 1 rep max or when you go to a sprint. For me, that's not a struggle. For me, I'm not saying for me that's not a struggle, I can do it.
No, I know what you mean.
I'm saying from a breath point of view, if you know what you need to do, it's not a struggle. You're
still in control. Yeah.
So you sprint, get rid of that excess CO2, open up the airways, go again. So if you do those deliberate exhales, so those little techniques that you can use in your practice, but if you're constantly struggling in the sense of you've lost control of the breath, or you're not aware of how you are breathing, and sadly quite often that's what we think we should do. It
should all be painful and a struggle, and it's not true at all. It's not true at all completely. And I call those breaths with my clients birthday candle breaths.
Yes.
I say use your birthday candle breaths, and it goes down really well. But actually, I completely agree with you. I'm glad you called me out on that, because that's completely correct. Is that it should actually never be a struggle if you have the skills.
Yeah.
And if you have that foundational breathing at rest, but the brilliant thing is about the Oxygen Advantage, why I love it as well, is it's so applicable to everyone, because even if you never go on that run, and which is very highly unlikely because of how good you feel once you have optimized your breathing, the amount of benefits that come from optimizing your breathing whilst at rest are just second to none anyway. So it's not the advert may say sports performance, but the essence is so much bigger than that with the Oxygen Advantage, I think.
Definitely. And with Patrick's new book, with the breathing cure, again, he's focused that much more on health.
Yeah.
So that you can see the angle is he's gone from Buteyko, Oxygen Advantage, and then really all of his knowledge is really putting all of that into the breathing cure. And then he just researches and curious. There you go. He's curious.
He's curious. He's curious, and he's really serving. He always was, but truly serving the collective now. That it's, you know, it's so applicable to everything. But I mean, I've told you a million times, the Oxygen Advantage changed my life simply because of the phrase "less is more." And that it doesn't have to be a struggle, and it doesn't have to be painful, and that you don't have to try so bloody hard. That was the thing, you know. And I think that is a huge message that the young people of today really, really need, is that it doesn't have to be that hard, you know. If you just know a few techniques and skills. When you started to learn the Oxygen Advantage, what was the biggest sort of thing for you? What was the biggest impact of those techniques on your everyday or on your sports performance, either one?
I'll tell you, the biggest impact actually was the language. And on this is what I like exploring myself now. So it's things like big breath, deep breath. I think that was my big aha. A deep breath doesn't have to be a big breath.
Yeah. Because
you constantly say, right, cueing someone, right, take a deep breath. And everybody, in general, I've done this with coaches, and even coaches do it, in general, will take a big breath or a fuller breath. Now, again, there's nothing wrong in that. But just from a language point of view, you can still breathe deep into the body. So deep just means further down. Yeah. But you can still breathe light. So if every time you're telling someone to take a deep breath, they want to be breathing the right volume of air for what their body needs at that moment in time, deeply. Yeah. And not bigly. Is bigly a word? So if I'm cueing, bigly should be a word. If I'm cueing, when I'm teaching my breath work, if I want someone to take a fuller breath, I'll say take a fuller breath. And there's a big difference between just breathing in fuller volume to otherwise hoiking everything up here. Yeah. So I think that was the biggest thing I realized, is that you can breathe light and deep. Biggest thing in terms of the breath holds, again, have really helped in terms of just psychologically realizing that you're not going to run out of oxygen. Yeah. That's another thing. Again, I think another big moment is thinking, I need more oxygen, so I'll breathe more air in, I'll breathe more air in, I'll breathe more air in. And you can't get any more oxygen into the body. But what you're actually doing is most probably reducing that oxygen being delivered from the blood to the cell. So I think those are the two big things, big and deep. And it's not just about breathing in more air to get more oxygen to where you need it. Yeah. I think it's something else that was big for me, actually, with going through the process of learning the Oxygen Advantage and learning to teach it, was the simplistic idea, but probably the most impactful for me, was awareness. That awareness is everything. The more awareness you have, the more power, the more autonomy you have over your own health and well-being, whether that's sports performance or whether that's general. You know, if you have no awareness, then how do you know if anything's out of balance? How do you know if anything's wrong? And I think that's interesting where you said about the deep breath, in terms of, for people listening, sort of crushing that assumption that there should be all this upper chest movement whilst we're running, whilst we're doing physical exercise, that actually that's not supporting the body in any which way. But a lot of people don't think to breathe deeply
finding that expansion of the lower ribs whilst they're moving and running, because they associate that image of huffing and puffing and all this movement up here, whereas that actually, you know, it's going to dry your throat out, it's going to exhaust you, it's going to XYZ, you know.
Again, remember, when we are exercising, you are going to be breathing fuller.
Yeah.
So the chest will expand as well. So what you don't want to be doing is restricting breath up
that
here,
chest,
even in sitting or resting. So you want flexibility in the rib cage. But you're right in the fact that if you're pulling too much air up here and it never gets deep down there, then you just end up in that vicious circle.
Super shallow breathing.
Yeah. But I think the thing is, again, I know some people have thought, oh, I can't breathe up here. So they actually start to create tightness in the upper chest.
Right.
And that then is not good, because then the ribs just get tight.
Yeah.
So when you're exercising, or when you do need an increased volume of air, that rib cage needs to be flexible enough. And the spine is so important, because the spine is tight, the rib cage isn't going to move. The rib cage needs to have elasticity in it to fill in the right places, but to actually expand where it needs to expand, not being blocked down here, or not being blocked upper chest as well. Actually, that's another nice one to think about, because people will often say, I'm a chest breather, I'm a belly breather. You can only breathe into the ribs, you can only breathe into the lungs. So again, that's a little bit judgmental. I'm a chest breather and a mouth breather. Well, actually, at certain times, being a chest breather and a mouth breather is actually beneficial to you. So again, that's how we judge ourselves. I'm not a runner. Or I can't do this, or I've got I've got bad posture, my posture's not good, I don't breathe very well.
It's fit for purpose, isn't it? And that curiosity, I suppose, of there's no one size fits all. It's what's serving you in this moment, and can you be malleable enough and have optimized your breathing to the point where you have such a solid foundation that you are malleable, not only in sort of your adaptability to different stresses on your body, i.e. running, but then we could even go into heart rate variability, where you are able to better respond to stress. You're more resilient because you're able to bring yourself back a lot quicker. You're able to put that gas pedal on rather than spiraling into this emotional breakdown that can lead to horrific problems down the line, relationship breakdowns and job losses that never needed to happen, all because of the breath. So I think we really underestimate the power of the breath still. Yeah. I think actually it's only taken its first baby steps, the breathwork world. What do you think?
3,000 years ago, it must probably started.
I know. That's the funny thing. 3,000 years ago it started, and yet we're still trying to get it into the mainstream and getting people to understand that, listen, people have been doing this for a while and it's been working for the last 3,000 years. So I think we should acknowledge it for the powerhouse that it is.
I think, as you said earlier, it's the simple things, because we tend to think, oh, breathing, how can you teach breathing? What do we have to do with breathing? I do it all day long, but
I've been breathing all my life.
And it's the bits like that people miss because they think it's not that it's not important, but it's just brushed over because we don't think of it as being awareness and necessary. But it's the simplest things that can make such a big difference.
I think it's the simplest things actually that can serve us the most in this point in the modern world. Have you heard the term de-evolution?
No, like that.
Okay, so de-evolution, I've heard a lot speaking to it. I think I read it in a book somewhere, but then someone I interviewed on this podcast, I cannot tell you what episode, but brought up that term as well, de-evolution, where they said, there's just too many cooks now. There's too many ideas. We've gone too far, that we're not serving ourselves in terms of our basic nature, our basic physiology, our basic psychology. If we go into the reptilian mammalian brain, of course, the prefrontal cortex is pretty new, but if we go into sort of our ancestral minds and what humans were made to do on a very basic level, the modern world doesn't necessarily serve that. And here we see a million autoimmune diseases that we can't find the cause of or the cure for, and all these awful things, etc., etc., coming up, which no one wants. But that particular person was saying that it's time to trace back to the simplicity, come back to our roots, come back to the people that ran because the sun was rising and because they needed to get somewhere and it was faster or more efficient to run. Not because they are supposed to go to the gym at 5 o'clock and they've got a pure gym subscription they pay every month, I know which one to me sounds a little bit more rooted and grounded. So the Deevolution thing really clicked with me actually, where I was like, there's so many things I can straight off the bat think of that have no benefit to humans in terms of our basic nature. They might make things a bit quicker. They might mean we put in less effort to do menial tasks, etc. They might make life a bit more comfortable, but I don't know whether they serve us indefinitely. What do you think?
No, I totally agree. As I was just thinking again when I was doing my little walk run this morning, and I'm just in the woods, and I'm lucky that I've got woods out there. I stopped. I'm just doing some Qi Gong in the woods, and it is the simple things that, do you know what I mean? That makes me happy for that moment in time.
Yeah.
And I was reading a post on Facebook of a friend who I've not seen for a long time. And it was actually quite sad because he said, I realize now I've never been happy in my life. And it really choked me up.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I was thinking that this morning, it's like, what is happening? God, we're going off in another direction.
No, it's relevant.
But it's like, just enjoy the really simple things. Like, I'm stood here in the middle of a wood, under a tree. I don't need a coffee. I don't need all of these things. I don't need to be on my phone. And if that's just one small bit of happiness that you get, register that, because that is really important from that life perspective. We don't need to be buying stuff all of the time to keep us happy, or searching all of the time to find things that make us happy.
No.
If you just drop into those really, really simple moments. And I think actually the whole COVID situation, I think that has sort of like made a lot of people realize that. It's like, what is happiness? What do I really want to get out of my life? What makes me content? Because if we're constantly striving for stuff, like you said earlier, you might miss something. You're never going to be happy in the moment if you're thinking, well, I need to be there, or I need to finish this race, or I need to get to the end of this marathon, or I need to get to Waitrose.
Yeah. It's like and the word that came to me there was fulfillment.
Yeah.
Is that happiness is such a term that's thrown around that, definitely being brought up, I was taught that happiness and success were very specific things under very specific terms and conditions, and that unless you had the car, the house, the marriage, etc., 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 and were recognized in society, you were not successful, and then you were not happy, and then you spend your whole thus far adult life undoing those ideas and realizing. And I did the same, that I take my yoga mat out and I do yoga in the woods to silence and move intuitively, and I don't even know if half of it is really yoga, but it's just moving in the way that my body is craving, and it costs me zero. And I don't need to justify it, and I don't know how many calories I've burnt, and it doesn't matter, because it gave me a moment of fulfillment. But I bet you if someone did monitor my breath there, I can't hear it. I'm not thinking about it. I can't feel it. It's completely effortless because I'm just in awe in the moment. And I think you're right in terms of when you find moments like that, you should hold on to them, and you should do more of that, because you don't need to justify it or explain it or prove it. No. As amazing as all of Patrick's research is, I do think there is a point to be made that you don't have to justify everything, especially in terms of self-improvement. That it's not like I did self-improve because I can see the number, and it's like, but do you feel better?
Mm.
You know, do you feel more fulfilled? Because you
Mm.
can't really explain that or articulate that. It's just a feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might get to the end of one race and you go, yeah, I've achieved that goal, but then are you fulfilled, or do you then think, right, I need to achieve the next goal?
What's the next one? Yeah.
That fulfillment.
Yeah, and it's like, actually, was the real fulfillment, and I read this in a great book called Inner Excellence. It's that is the real fulfillment, actually, all that training, the journey, the struggle, the build up, the day before the race, the people you met along the way. Like, surely that's actually what people do it for, is the process, not the chopping of the finish line, or that, that plastic medal you get at the end. I've never got a plastic medal. I haven't done that yet, any of these.
They're all wooden now.
They're all wooden.
There's some nice eco-friendly medals.
Ah, that makes me really happy. Okay, good. Well, what a great sort of point to wrap the conversation up as. I must say, I do want to ask you as we finish, for someone that does feel a bit hopeless and lost in terms of beginning their journey into wellness, as perhaps I'm sure we both did it at some point in our lives, what piece of advice would you give them to starting? It's always the hardest bit, isn't it? Starting,
I would say, is just to get moving, and that is whether you're walking or just doing some light jogging, or literally just moving around the house, or if you've got outdoors, to move outdoors. And particularly, I would say one of the biggest things is just stuff like opening up and reaching a little bit, and stretching, but stretching in a way that animals stretch. And I think it's one of the easiest ways to start. Do you know what I mean? It's called pandiculation. That's another good word.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Or malleable. I'm going to use that word. But actually, I know it sounds really simple.
Yeah.
Doing a nice stretch.
Yeah.
Easy breath, because we tend to get everything tight here. And if everything's tight here and we try and walk or move, then everything comes down into the ground. A really nice visualization, like you said at the very beginning, simple visualizations in Qi Gong, is you're connected to the ground through the feet, but at the same time you're connected to the sky through the crown. And that's a really nice way of even just standing and just tuning in with that. So you're not coming down all of the time, because this is where we tend to hold a lot of tension. And then if everything comes down here, then it affects the way you breathe. Right. And we don't, like you say, everything's made easy for us. So we don't have to reach up all of the time, because everything's at this height and everything. So do a little bit of reaching up or reaching out to the side, just to get the rib cage moving, get the spine opened up.
Yeah,
you can do that sitting down. Yeah. I've got a client who's having a knee op. So we can't really do much with the hips, with the knee and the hip, because she's in pain. So we do lots of nice Qi Gong practice, loads of good stuff, just sitting down, just getting the upper body open.
Yeah, and that's invigorating as well. Increases that blood flow, doesn't it? But without putting the body under stress, keeping the heart rate low. With that invigoration, that's great, and really energizing for the brain as well. It all connects. It all connects. Amazing. Well, great. It's been a pleasure and a half, as I expected it to be. So thank you so much for coming and talking to me.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for everybody listening. Hopefully,
yes. I'm sure hopefully everyone want to go out for a run after this. And remember, everyone, to listen for the change in your breath, not for the change or the bleep of a smartphone. That's the mic drop moment. All right. Thank you so much, Gray.
Thank you.